The Dominion had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. They had conquered 17 star systems. They had destroyed hundreds of species. Their warships were so large that they could block out the sun. Their soldiers numbered in the billions. No one had ever defeated them. No one had ever even come close. Supreme Commander sat in his chair on the command deck of his flagship. The ship was called the Eternal Conquest, and it was the largest vessel in the fleet. Was old, even by standards. He had led the Dominion's armies for 300 years. He had never lost a battle. He had never known fear. His officers brought him reports about a small planet in a distant solar system. The planet was called Earth by its inhabitants. It was a blue and green world, covered mostly in water. The species living there called themselves humans. They had no ships that could travel between stars. Their weapons were primitive compared to technology. Their planet was divided into many nations that often fought each other. Barely looked at the report. He had seen hundreds of worlds like this one. They were always the same. The inhabitants would see the fleet and panic. Some would try to fight, but they would fail quickly. Most would simply surrender. Within a few weeks, the planet would belong to the Dominion. "Send the standard message," ordered. "Give them 72 hours to surrender." His communications officer obeyed. The message was transmitted to every device on Earth that could receive it. The message was simple and clear. Surrender your world. Resistance is pointless. You have 72 hours. On Earth, the message arrived on a cold December morning. It was received by military bases, government buildings, and private homes all around the world. People stared at their screens in shock and fear. Some thought it was a joke. Others began to pray. Many simply could not believe what they were seeing. In Seoul, Admiral received the message in his office at the United Earth Defense Council. The council had been created 5 years ago, after astronomers had first detected signs of alien civilizations in distant star systems. Most people had hoped that first contact would be peaceful, had prepared for the possibility that it would not be. He was 63 years old, with gray hair and a face marked by decades of service. He had fought in 3 wars during his career. He had seen death and destruction that would break most men, but he had never faced anything like this. His aide, Captain, stood beside him as they watched the alien ships on the main display. The vessels were enormous, hanging in space beyond the moon like dark mountains. There were hundreds of them. Each one was larger than anything humans had ever built. "Sir," said quietly, "what do we do?" Studied the display for a long moment. He thought about his wife, who had died 3 years ago. He thought about his daughter and his 2. He thought about the billions of people on Earth who were now looking to their leaders for answers. "We have 72 hours, he said finally. His voice was calm and steady. "That's generous of them. We only need 48. Looked at him with surprise. "Sir." Turned to face her. There was no fear in his eyes, only determination. "Captain, we have been preparing for this day for 5 years. Every nation on Earth has been secretly building weapons and defenses. We have bunkers, tunnels, and hidden bases on every continent. We have weapons that these aliens know nothing about." He walked to the center of the command room where dozens of officers were waiting for orders. "Contact every military commander on the planet. Tell them to begin Operation Iron Wall, and get me a connection to every world leader. We need to have a meeting." Within hours, the leaders of every nation on Earth were connected through secure holographic displays. Presidents, prime ministers, kings, and generals all listened as explained the situation. "The aliens expect us to surrender," he said. "They think we are weak. They think we are divided. They believe that we will see their ships and lose hope." He paused and looked at each face on the display. "They are wrong." He showed them the secret preparations that had been made, underground bases that could survive orbital bombardment, weapons designed to fight enemies with superior technology, millions of soldiers trained for exactly this kind of war. We cannot match their technology, admitted. We cannot match their numbers, but we have something they do not expect. We have the will to fight. We have the courage to resist. And we have the determination to make them pay for every inch of ground they try to take. The leaders debated for hours. Some wanted to surrender. They argued that resistance was pointless, that humanity would be destroyed if they tried to fight. Others wanted to negotiate, to find some way to avoid conflict. But in the end, they voted to resist. Every nation, every leader agreed to stand together. For the first time in human history, the entire world was united against a common enemy. On the Eternal Conquest, received reports that the humans had not responded to his message. He was not concerned. Many species took time to accept their fate. They would surrender eventually. They always did. His science officers studied the planet below. They noted the primitive nuclear weapons, the chemical rockets, the simple communication systems. Nothing that could threaten the Dominion. Nothing that could even slow them down. Begin landing preparations, ordered. We will send ground forces to secure major population centers. The conquest will be complete within 1 week. He did not know that deep beneath the surface of Earth, millions of soldiers were moving into position. He did not know that scientists like Doctor were activating weapons that used principles of physics they had never discovered. He did not know that commanders like were preparing ambushes that would turn the desert into a graveyard. Had conquered hundreds of worlds. He had never met a species like humanity. He had never faced an enemy that refused to accept defeat. He had never encountered a people who would rather die than surrender. He was about to learn what humans were capable of when they had something to protect. The 72 hours began to count down, and Earth prepared for war. The landing ships descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars. There were 200 of them, each carrying 5,000 soldiers. They had chosen the Gobi Desert as their first landing zone. It was flat, empty, and far from major cities, the perfect place to establish a base of operations. Commander watched them come. He was 45 years old, with broad shoulders and hands that had seen decades of combat. He commanded the 7th Combined Arms Division, a force of 30,000 soldiers from 12 different nations. They had been hiding in the desert for 3 weeks, waiting for this moment. His soldiers were not on the surface. They were below it. Over the past 5 years, engineers had dug a network of tunnels and bunkers beneath the Gobi Desert. The tunnels stretched for hundreds of kilometers. The bunkers were buried 30 meters underground, invisible to any scanner. "They're landing," reported Sergeant, a young woman with sharp eyes and steady hands. She had been a schoolteacher before the invasion was announced. Now she led a squad of 20 soldiers. "I count 200 ships." Nodded. "Let them land. Let them think they're safe. We wait until they start moving." The ships touched down on the desert floor. Their doors opened and soldiers began to pour out. The alien warriors were tall, standing over 2 meters high. Their skin was gray and thick, like armor. They carried energy weapons that could vaporize a human in a single shot. They formed into perfect lines and began to march across the desert. Their officers expected no resistance. Their scouts had detected no human presence in the area. The desert appeared completely empty. It was not. Beneath the sand, thousands of human soldiers waited in silence. They could hear the footsteps of the enemy above them. They could feel the vibrations of the marching army. They held their breath and gripped their weapons. Watched the tactical display in his underground command center. The display showed the positions of every enemy soldier. It also showed the locations of every hidden bunker and tunnel entrance. "Wait," he said softly, "wait for them to spread out." They continued their march. Their thermal scanners showed nothing. Their motion detectors were silent. They had no reason to suspect that death was waiting just meters below their feet. When the first wave of alien soldiers reached the center of the killing zone, gave the order. "Now!" The desert exploded. All across the battlefield, hidden doors burst open. Human soldiers emerged from spider holes and camouflaged bunkers, firing as they rose. Rockets streaked toward alien tanks. Machine guns tore through enemy lines. Explosions threw sand and bodies into the air. They had never experienced anything like it. They were trained to fight enemies who stood in front of them. They had no defense against enemies who attacked from below, from the sides, from everywhere at once. Sergeant led her squad out of a tunnel entrance behind enemy lines. They fired their rockets at the nearest alien vehicle, destroying it in a ball of flame. Before the enemy could react, they disappeared back into the ground. All across the desert, similar attacks were happening. Human soldiers would appear, strike hard, and vanish before they could respond. The aliens fired their weapons at shadows and sand. They hit nothing. On the command ship high above the planet, Supreme Commander watched in disbelief. His tactical display showed chaos. His soldiers were dying by the hundreds, and they could not find the enemy. "What is happening?" he demanded. "Where are they coming from?" His officers had no answer. Their sensors showed nothing. Their scanners detected no tunnels, no bunkers, no hidden bases. The humans were simply appearing out of nowhere, killing and disappearing again. In 11 minutes, 3,000 soldiers were dead. The survivors were retreating in confusion, firing blindly at the ground beneath their feet. It did no good. The tunnels were too deep, too well protected. Commander allowed himself a small smile. The first battle was won, but he knew the war had only begun. "Pull back to secondary positions," he ordered. "They will bring heavier weapons next time. We need to be ready." His soldiers obeyed, melting back into the earth like ghosts. They left behind a battlefield covered with alien bodies and burning vehicles. The sand was stained gray with blood. On the Eternal Conquest, struggled to understand what had happened. He had lost 3,000 soldiers in less than 15 minutes. He had not killed a single human. "Impossible," he said. "These are primitives, they cannot do this." His senior officer, a veteran named, stepped forward. "Commander, perhaps we underestimated them. They fight differently than any species we have faced before." His eyes narrowed. "They fight like prey that has learned to hunt. They hide, they strike, they disappear." He stood and walked to the viewport, staring down at the blue planet below. "Increase the landing force. Send 50,000 more soldiers, and bring orbital bombardment platforms into position." Hesitated. "Commander, orbital bombardment will kill millions of civilians." "I am aware," replied coldly. "These humans need to learn that resistance has consequences. If they want to fight from underground, we will burn everything above them. We will turn their cities to ash. We will make them regret ever raising a weapon against us." He turned back to his officers. "This is not a conquest anymore. This is an extermination. Kill them all." Far below, Admiral received reports of the victory in the Gobi Desert. Captain's face was bright with hope for the first time since the invasion began. "We won," she said. "We actually won a battle." Nodded, but his expression remained serious. "This was just the first fight. They will hit back harder. They will use their ships to bomb our cities. Millions will die." "What do we do?" Looked at the tactical display showing the massive alien fleet in orbit. "We activate Project Veil, and we pray that Doctor's theories actually work." He picked up his communicator and called the secret bunker beneath the Korean peninsula. "Doctor," he said, "it's time. Light up the shield." The real war was about to begin. The first orbital strike hit Seoul at midnight. A beam of pure energy descended from the sky and turned the city center into a lake of molten glass. The heat was so intense that buildings simply evaporated. Over 2 million people died in seconds. Tokyo was next, then Sydney, then Los Angeles. Supreme Commander watched from his ship as humanity's greatest cities burned. He felt nothing but cold satisfaction. These humans had dared to resist. They had killed his soldiers. Now they would pay the price. "Continue the bombardment," he ordered. "Destroy every major city. Let them see the cost of defiance." In bunkers around the world, people huddled together and listened to the destruction above them. Children cried for parents who would never come home. Soldiers wept for the cities they had sworn to protect. It seemed like the end of everything. But deep beneath the mountains of Korea, Doctor was working to save them all. Was 52 years old. She had spent her entire life studying quantum physics. Most people had called her a dreamer. They had said her theories were impossible. They had laughed when she proposed building a planetary defense shield. No one was laughing now. Her laboratory was a vast underground chamber filled with machines that hummed with strange energies. Beside her worked her two best engineers, and they had not slept in 3 days. They had not eaten in 2. They had been working non-stop to complete Project Veil. "We're almost ready," reported. He was a young man with dark circles under his eyes and trembling hands. "The generators are at full power. The field emitters are aligned," added. She was barely 30 years old, but she was the most brilliant engineer of her generation. "If your calculations are correct, we can activate the shield in 10 minutes. Looked at the screens showing the destruction above. Another city was burning. Another 1,000,000 people were dying. She could not wait 10 minutes. "Activate it now," she said. "We'll adjust as we go." Her team obeyed. The machines roared to life. Energy surged through cables as thick as tree trunks. The entire bunker began to shake. Far above, something incredible happened. Earth's magnetic field, the invisible shield that protected the planet from solar radiation, began to change. It twisted and strengthened, responding to the machines below. A shimmer appeared in the atmosphere, visible even from space. The next orbital strike descended toward Paris. The energy beam hit the shield and scattered. It bent away from the city and dispersed harmlessly into space. Paris was saved. On the Eternal Conquest, alarms began to sound. Officers shouted in confusion. Their weapons were not working. Their attacks were being deflected by something they could not understand. "What is this?" demanded. "What are they doing?" No one had an answer. Science had never imagined such a thing. They had shields for their ships, yes, but the humans had turned their entire planet into a fortress. Admiral received the news in his command center. Captain was crying with relief. All around them, officers were cheering and embracing. "It worked," said. "The shield is holding." Allowed himself a moment of hope, but he knew this was not over. The shield could protect them from orbital bombardment, but they still had ground forces. They still had ships that could land. The war would have to be won the old-fashioned way. He activated his communicator and broadcast to every human military unit on Earth. "The shield is up. Their big guns are useless now. It's time to take this fight to them." Lieutenant received the message in the cockpit of his fighter jet. He was flying over the Pacific Ocean with his squadron of 20 aircraft. They were the best pilots Earth had ever produced, trained specifically to fight enemies with superior technology. "All wings," broadcast, "we're going on the offensive. Target the enemy landing ships. Don't let them put more soldiers on the ground." His squadron turned toward the nearest cluster of vessels. They were faster and more maneuverable than anything the aliens had. They had been built using lessons learned from the first contact with alien technology years ago. The battle was brutal. Fighters swarmed to intercept them. Energy weapons filled the sky, lost 3 pilots in the first minute. But he kept flying. He weaved between enemy attacks, got behind a landing ship and fired his missiles. The ship exploded in a ball of flame. "One down," he said. "Keep fighting." All around the world, similar battles were beginning. Human forces were emerging from their bunkers and tunnels. They were attacking enemy positions with everything they had. It was not a fight for territory. It was a fight for survival. In the Gobi Desert, Commander led a massive counterattack. His soldiers surged out of the ground like an army of ghosts. They overwhelmed a base and captured dozens of alien prisoners. It was the first time in history that soldiers had been taken alive. Sergeant fought at the front of the assault. She had lost half her squad in the last battle. She had watched friends die in the orbital bombardment. Now she fought with a fury that terrified even her own allies. "Push forward," she screamed. "Don't let them regroup." The humans pushed. They fought and bled and died, but they kept pushing. On the eternal conquest, realized that he was facing something his ancestors had never encountered. An enemy that would not break. An enemy that grew stronger with every attack. An enemy that turned every defeat into fuel for more resistance. For the first time in 300 years, Supreme Commander felt the cold touch of fear. He looked at the burning planet below, at the shield that blocked his weapons, at the reports of defeat after defeat streaming in from around the world. "What have we awakened?" he whispered. The war had lasted 3 weeks. They had expected conquest in 7 days. Instead, they were losing. Their ground forces were being destroyed piece by piece. Every time they established a base, human soldiers would appear from underground and overrun it. Every time they landed reinforcements, human fighters would swarm them before they could deploy. They had lost over 200,000 soldiers. They had gained nothing. Supreme Commander stood in his command center and stared at the tactical display. Red markers showed human attacks happening all over the planet. Blue markers showed positions falling one by one. "This cannot be happening," he said. "We have conquered 17 star systems. We have never been defeated." His senior officer approached carefully. "Commander, perhaps we should consider withdrawal. We can return with a larger fleet." Turned on him with fury in his eyes. "Withdrawal, the do not withdraw, the do not admit defeat." He pointed at the planet below. "We will break these humans. We will make an example of them that the galaxy will never forget." But even as he spoke, Admiral was planning the final phase of the war. The human commander stood in his bunker, surrounded by the best officers on Earth. Captain was at his side, along with commander, lieutenant, and doctor. They had fought together for 3 weeks. They had lost millions of people, but they had also achieved the impossible. "The enemy fleet is weakened," said. "Their morale is breaking. Their soldiers are afraid of us now." He paused and looked at each face in the room. "It's time to end this. We're going to take the fight to their command ship." The plan was simple and insane. A team of Special Forces operators would board the Eternal Conquest. They would fight their way to the command center. They would capture or kill Supreme Commander. Captain would lead the mission. She was 38 years old, with short black hair and eyes that showed no fear. She had been trained for exactly this kind of impossible operation. Her team included some of the deadliest soldiers on Earth. There was a sniper who had never missed a shot. There was an explosives expert who could blow through any wall. There were 20 more, each one a master of combat. "We will be outnumbered 1,000 to 1, told her team. "The corridors are designed for beings twice our size. We will have no backup and no escape route." She smiled grimly. "In other words, a normal Tuesday." Her soldiers laughed. They were afraid, of course. Only a fool would not be afraid. But they were also ready. They had been waiting their whole lives for a mission that mattered. This one mattered more than anything. The boarding party launched from a hidden base in the Pacific. Their shuttle was fast and stealthy, designed to slip past enemy sensors. It approached the Eternal Conquest from the dark side, hidden in the shadow of the moon. They breached the hull near the engineering section. Alarms immediately began to sound. Soldiers rushed to intercept them. Led her team into the corridor, firing as she ran. Energy blasts filled the air around her. She dodged and weaved, putting rounds into enemy after enemy. "Move," she shouted. "Don't stop for anything." set up position behind a support beam, and began picking off enemies with precise shots. Each bullet found its target. Soldiers fell with holes in their heads. Planted charges on a sealed door and blew it open. The team poured through, stepping over bodies and spent shell casings. They fought for 2 hours. They cleared corridor after corridor, deck after deck. They threw everything at them. It was not enough. On the command deck, received reports of the boarding action with growing horror. "They're inside the ship," he said. "How is this possible?" His officers had no answer. The Eternal Conquest had never been boarded. Its security was supposed to be unbreakable, but the humans were breaking through it anyway. "We've killed hundreds of them," one officer reported. "They keep coming." Stared at the display showing the human team advancing toward his position. They had lost over half their number. Any normal force would have retreated, but these soldiers kept pushing forward, climbing over the bodies of their fallen friends. "What are these creatures?" he whispered. The answer came when the doors to the command deck exploded inward. Stepped through the smoke, her armor covered in blood, both human and alien. Behind her came the survivors of her team, and 11 others. They raised their weapons at the officers. "Surrender," said. "Your fleet is broken, your army is defeated, this war is over." Looked at the human standing before him. She was smaller than the youngest child. Her weapons were primitive compared to his own, but she had fought her way through 1,000 of his soldiers to stand here. He had conquered 17 star systems. He had destroyed hundreds of species, but he had never faced anything like this. Slowly, Supreme Commander lowered himself to his knees. His officers followed. The Dominion, rulers of the stars for 10,000 years, surrendered to humanity. Far below, Admiral received the news. Captain was crying again, but this time with joy. All around the world, people were emerging from bunkers and shelters. They looked up at the sky and cheered. The war was over. Humanity had won. The command deck of the Eternal Conquest was silent except for the hum of damaged machines. Smoke drifted through the air. Bodies of soldiers lay everywhere. In the center of the room, Supreme Commander knelt before his human captors. Admiral walked through the wreckage slowly. His boots crunched on broken metal and shattered screens. He was tired beyond words. 3 weeks of war had aged him 10 years. He had lost millions of his people. He had watched cities burn and friends die. But he was still standing. Humanity was still standing. Captain walked beside him, her hand resting on her sidearm. Commander stood guard near the door. Captain kept her weapon trained on the kneeling officers. Her surviving soldiers surrounded the room, watching for any sign of trouble. Stopped in front of and looked down at the alien commander. Was ancient by any species standards. He had ruled the fleets for 3 centuries. He had destroyed worlds without mercy. He had killed billions without regret. Now he knelt in defeat before creatures he had dismissed as primitives. "You thought we would be easy," said. His voice was quiet but steady. "Every species you conquered before us probably was. They saw your ships and lost hope. They calculated the odds and chose to surrender rather than die." He paused, letting the words sink in. The officers listened in silence. They had never heard their commander addressed this way. They had never seen him humbled. "You made a mistake with us," continued. "You gave us 72 hours warning. You let us see you coming. You showed us exactly what we were facing." He shook his head slowly. "That was your first error." His translator rendered his response in a broken whisper. "We have conquered hundreds of worlds. None of them fought like you." "No," agreed. "They probably didn't." He crouched down to meet's eyes. "Let me tell you something about humans. We are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the most advanced, but we have something that you never expected." He leaned closer. "We refused to quit. When you pushed us, we pushed back harder. When you killed us, we killed more of you. When you burned our cities, we dug deeper into the earth and kept fighting." He stood up straight and looked around the ruined command deck. Your fleet is crippled. Half your ships are destroyed. The other half are too damaged to fight. Your army on Earth has been captured or killed. You have nothing left. Closed his eyes. The shame of defeat was worse than any physical pain. His ancestors had built an empire across the stars. He had destroyed it in 3 weeks against a species that could not even travel between planets. "What are you going to do with us?" he asked. Was quiet for a long moment. Captain watched him carefully. Many of the officers wanted revenge. They wanted to execute every prisoner. They wanted to burn worlds the way their own cities had burned. But had a different plan. "We're going to send you home," he said. The officers looked up in shock, even opened his eyes with surprise. "Home," he repeated. "Yes," turned and walked toward the main viewport. Through it he could see Earth glowing blue and green in the darkness of space. So small, so fragile, so incredibly strong. "You're going to return to your dominion," said, "and you're going to tell them what happened here. You're going to tell every species in your empire about the humans of Earth. You're going to tell them how we fought, how we bled, how we refused to surrender even when surrender was the logical choice." He turned back to face. "You're going to tell them that Earth is not a target, it's a warning." Shook his head slowly. "The Dominion will send another fleet, larger than this one. They will not accept defeat." "Then they will lose again," said simply, and again, until they understand." His voice hardened. "And tell them this as well. If any alien species ever comes to Earth with hostile intentions again, we will not be as merciful." He paused to let those words sink in. "Today, we spare you. We send you home to spread the message. But if you come back, if anyone comes back to threaten our world, we will not stop at defeating your armies. We will chase you across the stars. We will find you, and we will make you regret ever learning that humans existed." The command deck was completely silent. Even the officers who had wanted to die fighting now simply stared at this human with something close to fear. "Nodded to, escort them to their remaining ships, make sure they leave our solar system." He turned back to one last time. "Remember this day, Commander. Remember what happened when you got too close to Earth." Rose slowly to his feet. His officers followed. They were escorted out of the command deck by human soldiers, walking past the bodies of their fallen comrades. They said nothing. There was nothing to say. 3 days later, the surviving ships limped out of Earth's solar system. They carried barely a tenth of the force that had arrived with dreams of easy conquest. They carried the story of their defeat. Within a year, that story had spread across the galaxy. The Dominion, weakened by their loss, faced rebellions from dozens of conquered species. Within a decade, the Dominion had collapsed entirely. But no one attacked Earth again. Admiral retired to a small house inn. He spent his remaining years teaching history to children who would grow up never knowing the fear of invasion. Captain became the first human ambassador to the Galactic Council, representing Earth among the stars. Commander was promoted to general and spent 20 years building defenses that would never be tested. Captain, sergeant, lieutenant, doctor, and all the heroes of the war became legends. Songs were written about them. Statues were built in their honor. Children learned their names in school. And somewhere in the dark spaces between stars, alien commanders shared a new piece of wisdom. They passed it down from generation to generation. They warned their students and their officers and their children. Never underestimate the humans. Never attack their world. Never give them a reason to fight. Because if you get too close to Earth, you will learn what they are capable of. And you will repent it.